Hi everyone, today I'm talking about Vedic astrology or versus the power of belief and our infinite self. So what do I mean by that? A little background. Vedic astrology is a part of Hinduism traditionally, and it's like, I think its popularity, I would say that maybe it stopped at my parents' generation. I don't know, but a lot of people my age in India, even younger, and even older, don't really look to it very much anymore. And especially in the diaspora, like most people don't take it like seriously. And, but I've always just in the last, I would say 8 or 9 years, I've been really curious about it. Like I've always loved our iconography and the way we look at time and why we do things in pujas, how temples are the way they are, and it's very intricately designed with what's happening in the skies, right? So, and also just like the symbolism behind it, and just it's lasted this long, like what's so great about it, so I don't know, I think there's there's a deep beauty and wisdom in it if it's been around for this long. So I've dabbled in it off and on for the last, I would say 7 years or so, from Indian teachers in the West, Indian teachers in India, Western teachers here in the West, so people of all backgrounds. And I've taken a couple of Western astrology classes as well. So with the Indian astrology, I've always stopped at a certain point, and that's usually people usually start off by talking about the planets and the myths and why it's still relevant, and it's usually always I've usually gone through foundations, but it's typically I've stopped learning it because I get really, it kind of hits to the core of my sensibilities that I believe in the infinite self. There are no bounds, especially we're finding this out energetically and that, on a vibrational quantum level, that we originate thought, and you can think whatever you want to think. And after a certain point of thinking and rethinking and making that habitual, things start to manifest. Things start to materialize in a certain way, right? Subconsciously or consciously. So I think that those two ideas, right? One's very much, I think it's Eastern and Western, but let's just call it Western for sake of argument. So it's very much like this manifest destiny, the law of attraction, that kind of thing. But, how people always say, going to the moon, who would have thought that we'd actually have the science to do that? Or the Wright brothers and them making flight possible, and people telling them over and over again that it's impossible. The smartest people of that time, the most logical people of the time telling who seemingly are simple people that they can't do it, that they're stupid, that they're going to kill themselves, and it's against God to do those things, right? And then they do it, and then people quote the 4-minute mile, whatever, there's nothing new under the sun, but the capacity that we push ourselves to as humans, it's pretty remarkable, right? So that's what I mean by the infinite self. If you have a system like Vedic astrology telling you that what's possible for you and what's not possible for you, just that power of suggestion might influence the direction that you go. So I think just by the nature of astrology in general, but I'll talk about Vedic astrology, is that people are really concerned, right? We have free will, and Vedic astrology takes the long view and says you have free will, but you are part of an intricate system. And whether or not you realize it, you are playing a role in the system. And so in that way, like at a very, very large, like 64,000 feet point of view scale, like the forest view, right? Like over lifetimes and things like that. Like you have free will in the confines of what you are doing right now, of what your role is, of how you're embodied in this lifetime. So even though I understand that, I think that even buying into that system of which, by the way, astrology, all these systems are all man-made, right? Like there's no, I don't care if it's the best astrologer in the world or the best preacher in the world or the best vadyar in the world or whomever telling you these things, telling you whatever your capability is, capacity is, by looking at numerology or Enneagram or your past or whatever it is. I don't think ever can accurately represent what you yourself are capable of in the best sense of the word. So, and Vedic astrology is like any other system in that it's intricately part of the culture, and there's been a lot of science and a lot of, it's lasted for thousands of years. I get that. But it's still man-made, like literally men have made it, right? So it's definitely from also a certain perspective, certain class, and all those things. So with that comes a lot of just human fingerprints, right? Like there's ego involved, there's, self-interest involved, there's all these things. So it's like, why would you let someone else, no matter what their intentions are, even if they have the highest and good intentions for you, look at whatever system they're looking at, again, astrology, Enneagram, anything else, and tell you what your capacity is, what your future is going to be like. Like why even in the first place go and seek that out? Because I can tell you, at least from my perspective, no one usually goes to an astrologer, Vedic or otherwise, because times are great. They usually go when they're suffering in a big way, or have been suffering for years, and something just topped them over and they're like, I have no clue what's happening. I don't know how to cope with this. I just need some perspective. And so they might go to a Vedic astrologer initially. I think like astrology in general is just getting more popular just for like birth chart readings and stuff. So, but I would say for a lot of people, it usually takes it's like a tipping point for them to go, in the worst way, for them to go and spend, $150 to $200 to go see an astrologer for an initial session. Which I think is worth it, but so it's like, so there's that system, right? Like it's a man-made system, and basically you're externalizing to another human and their perspective, how they're reading your chart. And again, they could be the best, right? Or you're like going to a numerologist, or you're going to, whatever, you're going to someone in your own faith, in your own religion, who, has studied something for a very long time, and they have this very specific point of view from which they get, their advice from, and then they impart it upon you. So it's like, it's not necessarily coming from the inside out. Whereas versus the power of the self, right? Coming from self-love and coming from the voice of love and the vibration of love. I know I'm using a lot of tag words right now, but I don't really know how else to describe it. you know, like in all the best ways, like source energy. One of my friends says great spirit. I love her so much. I love that. Like that voice from which you live from the inside out, right? That's the power that I'm talking about, that I know that I believe in. And that's the power that is infinitely good for yourself and usually thusly for others, and gives you enormous power, the conscious and awareness of knowing that you have that power, that regardless of what anyone or anything ever says, because no human, no matter how learned they are in mysticism or sacred arts, or, you know, whether they're the highest priest of the priests or the highest, you know, like pagan presider over whatever, and then, you know, whatever it is, or the Vedic astrologers or any astrologer, it's like that's still information coming from the outside, right? And so it's like corrupted. I don't mean that in like a mean way, but I'm just saying that it has human fingerprints all over it. Whereas the inside, especially if you've been on like a healing path or, you know, something like that, where you're more and more getting in touch to your higher self, and then you're connecting your higher self, excuse me, from like to your higher power, or what you call God, or whatever gives you that infinite source of love and forgiveness and all of that good stuff. That's where I think, that's where the power comes in, is that you have, ultimately, no matter what anybody else says, the most powerful voice is your own from the inside out. From the inside to you praying to your higher power, and your direct connection from yourself to the higher power is the most powerful and creative and loving force that there is. And that knows no bounds. And because that knows no bounds, you yourself are boundless. And that's like, I think, that's the power that when people talk about these things, they talk about it from the inside out, you know, and they talk about connecting to your higher self and knowing that you have infinite power. I truly believe it. I like 1,000% believe it. And a lot of these other things, like whether you're practicing a religion that's not your own, whether you're practicing now a religion that is your own, whether you're like, you know, you're taking the best parts in a respectful way from different religions and paths and wisdom traditions, and that's what you're like building in your mind and in your heart, you know, that helps fortify that knowledge that you are infinitely capable of doing whatever you want in this world, is what I 1,000% believe without a doubt. So that's like the power of self and the power of infinite, like the infinite power of self, rather. So what I think that Vedic astrology does, and all these other systems, is I think that it puts very man-made cages around that infinitude of self-power and doing exactly what you want to do in this life, no matter the obstacles. So again, it doesn't mean that God doesn't speak through other people or through different programs or things like that. That's not what I mean. It's that at the end of the day, you'll know yourself what resonates for you, what doesn't, what kind of seems like not right for you, what doesn't. I mean, that can take sometimes, especially if you come from a big trauma background, that can take time for you to really, for your body's antenna to be in tune to those things that make you feel good in a way that's not like a desperation. That's not like, like an addict attraction to something out of desperation, but it's more like it resonates and it's just like it rings true to all levels of your experience and where you want to go and what would make you feel proud. So in a lot of ways, I think that they're at odds, Vedic astrology and all these systems, versus just having that power to connect, that power within yourself, that infinite power with yourself, that God's, your higher power, or whatever that created us, whatever you believe has given you, you can keep drawing from, and of course the best way possible. So that's what I was thinking about today. I've been really, I've been always very magnetized to Vedic astrology, and I've always stopped, and that's why. And I was wondering, like I'm kind of like at a crossroads. Like, do I continue? Can I still believe in the infinite power of self if I were to start practicing being like a Vedic astrology practitioner and taking on clients and stuff like that? Because I've already been taking classes for, again, like I would say 7 or 8 years, off and on throughout the years, and always reaching out to astrologers and things like that. So it's a big interest, but it kind of, I feel like it definitely goes against what I feel is within every single one of us as embodied humans, which is infinite power and grace from higher power, from the energy and the source of love that made us. And we can do anything and everything, just as long as we're not hurting ourselves or other people, and that nothing is impossible. So anyways, I just wanted to talk about this and see if anyone had any thoughts on it. I would love to hear them. And thanks for listening, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.